1777 was the most dangerous year for the colonial cause in the American Revolution, with 3 British armies poised to sweep like birds of prey down upon the centrally located city of Albany, and from there cut the head off the snake. The first of these armies, commanded by John Burgoyne, would move from the north on Albany, with the largest army commanded by Sir William Howe coming up from New York City. The third army, often disregarded when studying the plan, would be St. Leger's 2,500 Tories, native people, and British regulars that would come up from Ontario and then down the Mohawk River. With Albany at the center of all 3 armies, the next part of the plan would be to move down what is now Route 20, Boston Road, and attack the city of Boston from the land side. And you'll remember that the British had been besieged in Boston for nearly a year by George Washington. They weren't going to let that happen again. Now, speaking of George Washington, Sir William Howe had a score to settle with him for some little events that had happened at Trenton and Princeton. And he immediately abandoned the plan and began a wild goose chase after George Washington, who fought 2 tough fights against him at the Battle of the Brandywine in Germantown. Though Howe was able to take Philadelphia, his army would be of no help to the other 2 in the plan to take Albany. Now, that really didn't seem to bother Burgoyne much, who quickly captured Ticonderoga and Mount Independence, pursued the retreating rebels to Hubbardton and bested them in the only battle fought in Vermont, and then moved south down to the Hudson River at Glens Falls, with the only thing now standing in the way of Burgoyne and success being Horatio Gates's 8,000 men on a piece of ground selected by Benedict Arnold at Stillwater. Meanwhile, out at Oswego, St. Leger had had similar success and moved up to the old colonial fort known as Fort Stanwix that had been placed at the great carrying place between the Mohawk River and Wood Creek. If St. Leger could take Fort Stanwix, he'd be able to move down the Mohawk and get behind Horatio Gates's fortifications at Stillwater, which would totally upend that defensive line. This was a critical moment for the colonies. Joseph Brant, with fighting Mohawk and Seneca warriors, and the Butlers in command of the Royal Rangers, all fell upon a relief column sent to help the fort on August 6th at the Great Battle of Oriskany, before everything came down to a coup de guerre. Rome, New York, Stanwix National Monument here, Fort Stanwix, in the center of a fairly large New York City. The fort was here first. A cork in the bottle between Lake Ontario and a stream that fell into it called Wood Creek. A carrying place, and then the Mohawk River. And this fort guards the carrying place and the Mohawk River junction. So this is extremely strategically placed. Notice that the fort doesn't look like much if you're a distance away. It's got a low sloping earthen hill on all sides of it. And then when you get to the actual fort, you have a moat along with multiple abatis, and then the wooden bastion itself, which is about 14 feet high. You can imagine this would have been a very difficult fort to storm. And if you wanted to take it, you would need artillery of at least 12-pound size in nature. A flying column, an army composed of light infantry, a raiding force would have a very difficult time with Fort Stanwix. As we know they did. Gansvoort and Willett in command of the fort, surrounded by Ticonderoga, Joseph Brant and his Mohawk and Seneca. Out here, the Queen's Loyal Rangers, John Butler, and St. Leger's regulars. Over here, and a cordon of scouts and skirmishers trying to keep the fort closed off, and that wasn't easy. The fort siege was never complete. And it was not lifted by an actual feat of arms. You think about a siege needs to be lifted by a larger army coming up and opening up communications with the fort, therefore supplying the fort, or fighting a battle with the besieging force. Well, in the case of Stanwix, Benedict Arnold used what is known as a coup de guerre, and capturing a Tory named Hanyo Schuyler back at Little Falls, he would take the young man who had Down syndrome, and after filling his coat full of bullet holes and maybe slapping him around a little, he sent him back to the Seneca and Mohawk, who had adopted him as a member of their tribe, with the news that Dark Eagle, which is the native name for Benedict Arnold, was coming. And he had more soldiers than the trees had leaves in summertime. And if the native people didn't leave, Arnold would kill them and eat their livers. Within a short time, on the night of August 26th, Brants, Mohawks, and Seneca, especially the Seneca, had busted into the British stores of rum, gotten filthy drunk, rolled the British cannons into the Wood Creek, seized anything they could out of the Tory and British camp, and made for the hills, forcing St. Leger and his British forces to lift the siege. Arnold did this with a simple rumor, a coup de guerre. So at Stanwix, as with the rest of the Saratoga campaign, a little luck by the colonists, along with hubris and indecision on the part of the British, and the brilliant fighting leadership of Benedict Arnold, conspire to defeat superior British forces. Now, no commander deserves more credit in the early years of the American Revolution's Northern Campaign than Benedict Arnold, and he will, shortly after the siege at Stanwix, rise to his greatest height in commanding the attacks on Bremen's Redoubt at the Second Battle of Saratoga, where he will be badly wounded in his left leg, the same leg he had been struck in at the attack on Quebec. The wound would prevent him from savoring the fruits of his victory in the surrender by Burgoyne to Gates just a few weeks later. Yet, on the battlefield at Saratoga, a monument to his heroic left leg is there for any visitor to see. Fort Stanwix in Rome, New York, is a reconstruction of the original fort on the site where it once stood. And this reconstruction, an act of the federal government back in the 1970s, as a little bit of urban renewal for the city of Rome, did not go as you might think. And a lot of residents of Rome are pretty upset at the mess they say it made of the town center. But if you're in the area, I do recommend you stop, because it's pretty cool to check out. And I enjoyed my time there and bringing this video to you.